ॐ परतत्त्वे सदा लीनो रामकृष्णसमाज्ञया यो धर्मस्थापनरतो वीरेशं तं नमाम्यहम्. Last time I introduced the chapter on freedom. Today I will introduce it again. On the very first day we saw that this Karma Yoga of Swami Vivekananda is a Prakarana Grantha of Vedanta that he mentions toward the end. But here he is starting with pure Vedanta. The half of this chapter, you may say, is pure Vedanta. And what is that pure Vedanta? The conclusions of Vedanta is that there is only one reality, one without a second. We also call it Satchit Ananda, absolute, Akhanda, and it is beyond everything, but it has a nature of appearing as this world through names and forms. Through infinite names and forms, Brahman appears as this world. Now, when we say Brahman appears as this world, the question comes, to whom it appears? And that is most important. We as we are today can know anything, everything. We can see, feel, touch, everything. We have only two instruments for that. One is our mind, and to help the mind, there are 5 sense organs. We cannot know today anything which is not known to these two factors. And so, we are looking at Brahman. We are seeing Brahman, we are touching Brahman through our mind and indriyas. Now Brahman is one without a second. There is no motion, no doership, no change. And so, generally, what we call cause and effect, whole universe we see, we feel every moment, it is bound by the laws of cause and effect. And Brahman being one without a second, without a change, without any motion or movement, there cannot be any cause and effect in Brahman. But in the world we see cause and effect. So where from this cause and effect comes? That is our question. In Brahman there is absolutely no cause and effect. It being one, permanent, always same, without any change. So where is the question of any cause and where is the question of any effect? On the other hand, the world we see, we feel it is bound by the laws of cause and effect. For thinking in this world, everything, we have to seek this cause and effect. So our question is, from where this cause and effect comes? If it is not in Brahman, or it is there in the world, then from where it comes? And the answer is, it comes from our mind. In the ancient Vedanta, our mind was called as Maya's first product mind, was shown in various analyses. One of which was Desh Kal Nimitta, space, time, law of causation. These are the very constituents of our mind. In the modern age, German philosopher Immanuel Kant found out this fact. The modern world knows this through the German philosopher Kant. And same terms, space, time and causation. So what Kant says is that we cannot know the real nature of anything of this world, let alone God or Atman. One dust particle if we take, we cannot know what is its real nature. Because the moment we go to know it, we project the network, website of our mind on it, mind and indriyas on it. If we only think in the mind, think, feel, imagine, without indriyas, then the mind web, which is time, place and causation, is put upon it. Even if you use the indriyas, it is the mind through indriyas that is put upon this world, put upon Brahman actually. And so, the only, I am trying to put it rationally, the only place from where this time, space and causation has emanated is our mind. In Brahman, no chance of being cause and effect. Another conclusion of Vedanta is that we are that Brahman. That Brahman is our real nature, Tattvam Asi. That Brahman is what we really are. Even about ourselves, our knowledge is through our mind and indriyas. And so, we think of ourselves as individuals, we think of ourselves as subject to cause and effect, we think of the entire world as filled with cause and effect. So, the source from where this element of cause and effect is coming is our mind, and as we think, feel, perceive ourselves and the entire world through our mind, we feel that this cause and effect is universal. Universal laws we talk of in physics or physical sciences, social sciences, in everywhere we talk of psychological sciences, we talk of laws are universal. Now, what is the universe? Universe is that portion, we cannot call portion, that projection of one without a second reality called Brahman, which projection is caught by the network of our mind. By this mind, we cannot know Brahman as it is. Unless the mind changes its nature, it cannot know Brahman. Because as soon as it goes to know anything in the world, it projects the time, space and causation on that. And whatever is caught in this mesh of time, space and causation alone is known to the mind. And everything appears bound by irrevocable laws of cause and effect. Now, we want mukti. The name of this chapter is freedom. And that is the only goal of life. Swamiji has repeatedly shown in three ways. Aim of life is knowledge. Aim of life is freedom. Aim of life is freedom through knowledge. In these three ways, Swamiji has shown clearly the aim of life. And in contrast, he has told us pleasure cannot be the goal of life. How? Because pleasure changes. In that same connection, we can say work cannot be the goal of life because work is a result of our mind. And having established this, now the problem is stated in very simple words. As soon as we perceive ourselves and the world through our mind, there is no release. We are permanently bound. Because when we perceive anything through the mind itself supplies the cause and effect. And that is why we feel that whatever action we do, we will have to reap the result thereof. Swamiji has repeatedly shown this. Because action we do is through our mind, and the cause and effect is in our mind. Suppose we don't have the mind. Suppose we don't have the mind in the sense, suppose we can perceive the reality without mind. How can we? Why not? For perceiving any outside object, we require mind and indriyas. Actually, mind and indriyas are making outside object, otherwise we are perceiving Brahman only. If something is in our mind, like pain, pleasure, hatred, love, it is in our mind. For that we do not require our indriyas to perceive. But we are perceiving it in the mind. Things in the mind, indriyas do not reach there, indriyas are not required there, mind pursues. Now we are thinking of a real nature, which is much nearer to us than our mind. Just as to know things in the mind, we do not require external indriyas. Similarly, to know our own real nature, we do not require the mind. It is very difficult for an ordinary man to think that how can we know without the mind. Now what is the instrument of knowledge there? We are the instrument of knowledge. We are not the mind. Our mind is an instrument. But we have the capacity to know ourselves. And that is called in Vedanta aparoksha anubhuti. Immediate perception. Immediate perception of our own nature, what it will show us? There is no cause and effect. Immediate perception of our real nature will show we are Brahman, one without a second, there is no cause and effect. So the problem reduces to this. So long as we are using the mind, we cannot get rid of bondage. And the moment we can come out of the mind, we can. The moment we can come out of the mind, there is no bondage ever. We are eternally free. Not that we become free at that moment. We realize at that moment that we are eternally free. There was nothing which could bind us. This is the problem. Now where does Karma Yoga come in? We have stated a theory. Those, Swami Vivekananda is telling us, those powerful wills, he says. Powerful will does not mean to move the world. Those who have this knowledge, experiential knowledge, that I do not require my mind. He has nothing to do. He is free. He is ever free. Nothing can bind him. But we are habituated to use our mind. Then how to come out of this to get our freedom? There only this work comes. If you are out of our mind, I am not saying of the mad people, if we are out of our mind, we have no work at all. Which has been described by Swamiji previously, and again in this chapter he will tell us, according to the Gita 3rd chapter, Yastu Atmaratireva Syat Atmatruptascha Manava Atmani evacha santushtah tasya karyam na vidyate. One who can experience his own self, one who is happy with his own self, one who is satisfied with his own self, for him the question of work does not arise. But it is easier said than done. Swamiji will tell us here, handful of people throughout the world realize this. What others have to do, what we have to do, we have to work. So long as this idea that I am the doer is there, I have to deal with the world, I have to work. And then, while working, slowly we have to shift our consciousness. Work will teach us many things that Swamiji has shown up till now. We help ourselves and not the world. We gain experience by the world, by work. And when slowly and gradually we become strong enough, strong is not physical, strong is in knowledge. When we gain full strength due to knowledge, then we come out of the work. Or the second method Swamiji will suggest here is those, he will introduce there, those who believe in a Saguna Brahman or Ishvara, personal God. Who creates? Who is the creator, preserver and destroyer of this world? Then we have bhakti, we throw everything on him, all work is done by him, all fruits are his, and this helps us to go beyond our mind. Becoming devoted to him who is beyond our mind, we also go beyond our mind. So, three ways Swamiji is telling. One is for those strong-willed or those who have knowledge, real, they are mukta. Those who do not have knowledge have to do work, but work on the basis of knowledge if we can do. If we can put that knowledge as the basis of our work, then gradually we come out of this work. Or if we put devotion to God as the basis of work, then we come out. This is the chapter freedom. The chapter freedom tells, so long as mind is there, we are bound. When we come out, we are mukta. This is easy to talk. If we do not realize this, we have to put knowledge as the base of our work. Or we can put bhakti, love of God, as the base of our work. And through that work, actually through the bhakti which is at the base of that work, through the jnana which is at the base of that work, we come out of that work. What does work do? Work increases the power of the attitude behind work. If the attitude behind work is jnana, then work helps us to grow in that jnana. If the attitude in work is bhakti, the work helps us to grow into that bhakti. And we can have the third way, which is called Jnana Mishra Bhakti. We can use both knowledge and bhakti as the basis, and work will increase, give strength to our knowledge and bhakti, and we will come out. This is the place of Karma Yoga. Now we read. And this has to be read with a very calm, peaceful mind, because we have to understand this point. Law, how law is universal. Freedom. In addition to meaning work, we have stated that psychologically the word karma also implies causation, where he has stated it in the very beginning of Karma Yoga, on the first page. Giving different meanings of karma, he had given this meaning that karma means law of causation. The achedya bandhan of karma and karma phal. Any work, any action, any thought. Thought means a subject-object thinking, and that itself is work. Any action, he explains. Any work, he explains. Any action, any thought that produces an effect is called a karma. That produces an effect. That means the man of realization, his karma or his thought does not produce any effect, because he knows that he is not bound. Thus the law of karma means the law of causation, of inevitable cause and sequence. Instead of effect, he calls sequence. If this has happened, that will happen. Wheresoever there is a cause, there an effect must be produced. This necessity cannot be resisted, and this law of karma, according to our philosophy, is true throughout the whole universe, universal. Whatever we see or feel or do, whatever action there in anywhere in the universe, while being the effect of past work on the one hand, becomes on the other a cause in its turn and produces its own effect. So why we do a work? Because we had a desire. We had a momentum. So our work is the result of something past, and our work will become the result of its fruit. It is necessary together with this to consider what is meant by the word law. By law is meant the tendency of a series to repeat itself. That is law. Tendency of a series to repeat itself is hen is there, we get an egg. If the egg is there, we get a hen. This series repeats. We get a hen, then from that hen we get another egg. From the seed we get the tree, from tree we get another seeds. This is called law. The tendency of a series to repeat itself. When we see one event followed by another, or sometimes happening simultaneously with another, we expect this sequence or a coexistence to recur. We expect. That means it is in our mind. Our mind is expecting. If we see cloud and rain, if we see first cloud and afterwards rain, our mind tells us that every time there is a cloud, the rain will come. Or when we see rain, we surmise cloud was there. When we see fire somewhere at a distance, smoke at a distance, we immediately imagine that there is a fire there. Our mind expects this series to recur. Our old logicians and philosophers of the Nyaya school call this law by the name of Vyapti. Vyapti means inevitable association. If fire is there, smoke is there. This is called Vyapti. And where is this Vyapti? In our mind. We'll say, we see in the world itself is what we see through our mind. So the law universal means it is in our mind. According to them, all our ideas of law are due to association. A series of phenomena becomes associated with things in our mind in a sort of invariable order, so that whatever we perceive at any time is immediately referred to other facts in the mind. Any one idea, or according to our psychology, any one wave that is perceived, produced in the mind stuff chitta, must always give rise to many similar waves. This is the psychological idea of association. When one wave rises, other waves rise. And causation is only an aspect of this grand pervasive principle of association. That means if this is there, that is there, not necessarily a cause. I will give an example. We used to study this in statistics. In an examination, some boys got very good marks in mathematics. Some boys got very good marks in physics. And we will see that 80-85% were common. So these two things happen together. We cannot say that getting more marks in mathematics is the cause of getting more marks in physics. That we cannot say. But these two things are associated together. These days, everything is statistical. Now corona has come. Doctors are struggling to get some vaccine. If on any disease, 100 patients are treated with one particular medicine, if 80 or 85 are treated, 10, 15 might have died. But the doctor said this is the medicine for this disease. Because 80-85% were cured. So, association. Everything has become statistical these days. Some joke also is there, when a patient went to a doctor, very difficult surgery was prescribed. Then the patient says, what are the chances? Doctor says, 10%. He says, what is the statistical chances? He says, 1 in 100. Then how do you say 10%? Because 99 have died by my hand, now you are the 100. This is statistical. So, one of the aspects of this association is causation. He has got good marks, so he has passed away. This is causation. He has got good marks in mathematics, so he has got physics. No, this is not causation, but association. So association is a wider element than cause and effect. One of the cause and associations is called cause and effect. This is the psychological idea of association, and causation is only an aspect of this grand pervasive principle of association. This pervasiveness of association is what is called in Sanskrit vyapti. In the external world, the idea of law is the same as in the internal. The expectation that a particular phenomena will be followed by another and that the series will repeat itself. This is our mind is reading. The expectation is in our mind. Really speaking, therefore, law does not exist in nature. Nature here means Brahman only. Law does not exist outside our mind. That is the meaning. Law exists in our mind. When we read Brahman through our mind, then law comes. Practically, it is an error to say that gravitation exists in the earth or that there is any law existing objectively anywhere in nature. Law is the method, the manner in which our mind grasps a series of phenomena. It is all in the mind. Certain phenomena happening one after another or together and followed by the conviction of the regularity of their recurrence, thus enabling our minds to grasp the method of the whole series, constitute what we call law. Understood now? Swamiji has clearly shown this. It is the expectation of the mind. The next question for consideration is what we mean by law being universal. Our universe is that portion of existence. Existence is Brahman. Our universe is that portion of existence which is characterized by what the Sanskrit philosophers call Desh Kal Nimitta, or what is known to European psychology as space, time and causation. That portion which is cut off from the existence by our mind is this. This universe is only a part of the infinite existence thrown into a peculiar mold composed of space, time and causation. It necessarily follows that law is possible only within this conditioned universe. Beyond it, where there is no mind to read it. There cannot be any law because Brahman is unchanging. When we speak of the universe, we only mean that portion of existence which is limited by our mind. The universe of the senses, which we can see, feel, touch, hear, think of, imagine. So this is also the mind and the indriyas. This alone is under law. But beyond it, existence cannot be subject to law. Because causation does not extend beyond the world of our minds. Anything beyond the range of our mind and our senses is not bound by the law of causation, as there is no mental association of things in the region beyond the senses and no causation without association of ideas. So the method by which our mind grasps is called association of ideas, and when the association is not there, there is no question of law. It is only when being is another name of Brahman, please, Purusha, that is translated in English as being. Because existence should not appear as material. Being is a living substance, being. Being means a consciousness. So it's called Purusha. It is only when being or existence gets molded into name and form, Namru, that it obeys the law of causation and is said to be under law. Because all law has its existence in causation. From causation, all the laws are defined. Therefore, we see at once that there cannot be any such thing as free will. Will is a product, will is in our mind. So, will has to follow the cause of life and effect. The very words are a contradiction because will is what we know, and everything that we know is within our universe. And everything within our universe is molded by the conditions of space, time and causation. Everything that we know or can possibly know must be subject to causation, and that which obeys the law of causation cannot be free. It is acted upon by other agents and becomes a cause in its turn. But that which has become converted into the will, become means perceived through our mind. Which has become converted into the will, which was not the will before we perceived it, but which, when it fell into the mold of space, time and causation, became converted into the human will. Human will is in his mind, so it is subject to time, space and causation. But which, when it fell into this mold of space, time and causation, became converted into the human will, is free. Comma is there, eh? That which fell into this, that originally is free. That when not pursued by the mind but directly pursued is pursued as free. When that is pursued through mind, it is not free. And when this will gets out of this mold of space, time and causation, it will be free again. It will not be will then, it will be only existence pure. From freedom it comes and becomes molded into this bondage, and it gets out and goes back to freedom again. So that is the what you call the human soul or Atman. Will means I, understand? Will means I shall do this is will. So as soon as it has become I, it has become conditioned by our mind, and then it is bound by the law of causation. But before is not in the time sense. When we say in that condition, when I consciousness has not come, the consciousness itself is ever free. When the consciousness itself becomes I consciousness, that is in our mind and is bound. When the I consciousness knows its own real nature, that it is only a reflection. The real nature is consciousness, one without a second, that is free. And when this will gets out of this mold of space, time and causation, it will be free again. From freedom it comes and becomes molded into this bondage, and it gets out and goes back to freedom again. The question has been raised as to from whom this universe comes, in whom it rests, and to whom it goes. And the answer has been given, Vedanta, that from freedom it comes, in bondage it rests, and goes back into that freedom again. So when we speak of man as no other than the infinite being, which is manifesting itself, we mean that only one very small part thereof is man. What is man? We know is a very small part or very small projection in our mind, in everybody's mind, not only our mind. He is not meaning subjective, but everybody has a mind, and when it comes through the mind, it becomes bound. And the so when we speak of man as no other than that infinite being which is manifesting itself, we mean that only one very small part thereof is man. This body and this mind which we see are only one part of the whole, only one spot of the infinite being. He has corrected the language. One part of the whole, he says one speck in the infinite being, because the infinity cannot have parts. So some word we use the word part. One shade, whatever, one projection which we see through the mind, that much is the world. That much is what I is. Only one spot of the infinite being. This whole universe is only whole universe that we perceive. This whole universe is only one speck of the infinite being. And all our laws, our bondages, our joys and our sorrows, our happinesses and our expectations are only within this small universe. Entire universe, but he calls it small, finite, in comparison to the actual being or reality. All our progression and digression are within its small compass. So you see how childish it is to expect a continuation of this universe, the creation of our minds, and to expect to go to heaven, which after all must mean only a repetition of this world that we know. Same, because it is in the mind only. You see at once that it is an impossible and childish desire to make the whole of infinite existence conform to the limited and conditioned existence which we know. Which we know or can possibly know is through our mind, and the actual reality is beyond our perception, normal. When a man says that he will have again and again the same thing which he is having now, or as I sometimes put it, when he asks for a comfortable religion, that means don't ask me to change my awareness. That is called comfortable religion. You may know that he has become so degenerate that he cannot think of anything higher than what he is now. He is just his little present surroundings and nothing more. That surroundings are conditioning our thought of ourselves. He has forgotten his infinite nature. Forgotten in the sense, he is not knowing it now. And his whole idea is confined to these little joys and sorrows and hard jealousies of the moment. Here again, the break of individual to individual comes through the mind, and then only the possibility of jealousy comes. Heart jealousy is of the moment. If you are beyond mind, then there is no jealousy. He thinks that what happens to the Mahapurushas? If somebody achieves something, they are not jealous. They think, oh, this friend of mine or this another form of mine has achieved. That's all. He thinks that this finite thing is the infinite, and not only so, he will not let this foolishness go. Foolishness. The great Gaudapad says, Abhuta Abhinivesh. That is not true. About that, man has become obsessed. And so long as he is obsessed, the world will go on. If he is not obsessed, if he sees the truth, there will be no world for him. He clings on desperately unto Trishna, the thirst after life. What the Buddhists call Tanna and Trisa. Trishna is Sanskrit, and there are two derived languages, Pali and Prakrit. So in one of them Trishna, the Tanna, and the other Trisa. There may be millions of kinds of happinesses and beings and laws and progress and causation, all acting outside the little universe that we know. And after all, the whole of this comprises but one section of our infinite nature. More than what we know, maybe Swargas or so many lokas. But whole of this together is limited by our mind. One section of the infinite nature. To acquire freedom, we have to go beyond the limitations of this universe. It cannot be found here. Perfect equilibrium, that is Sankhya or Samatha, or what the Christians call the peace that passeth all understanding, beyond reason. That is why passeth all understanding. Cannot be had in this universe, nor in heaven, nor in any place where our mind and thoughts can go, where the senses can feel, or which the imagination can conceive. Even imagination. It is only through the law of causation it works. No such place can give us that freedom. Whether Vaikuntha or Goloka or whatever, Salokya and Samipya, they cannot give us freedom because the name and form are there, because the law of causation is there. There may be places. No such place can give us that freedom because all such places would be within our universe and it is limited by space, time and causation. There may be places that are more ethereal than this earth of ours. Ethereal, ether was the name in those days. That means Swarga, Vaikuntha, Kailasa, Ramakrishna Loka or whatever it is. There may be places that are more ethereal than this earth of ours, where enjoyments may be keener, but even those places must be in the universe and therefore in bondage to law. So we have to go beyond, and real religion begins where this little universe ends. That is the main point. Understand? Real religion, whether you call Karma Yoga or any by name, if it is religion, it depends upon transcendence. This is the most important sentence. And real religion begins real. Real religion begins where this little universe ends. Little universe, all the apparently infinite universe, Swamiji calls little, because it is perceived through the mind. These little joys and sorrows, little means finite. These little joys and sorrows and knowledge of things and their end there. And the reality begins. The perception, that meaning is that the perception of the reality begins. Reality is beginningless, endless. Reality begins means our perception of reality begins. Until we give up the thirst after life, the strong attachment to this our transient, conditioned existence, transient, we have no hope of catching even a glimpse of that infinite freedom beyond. Infinite beyond is infinite freedom beyond. And we cannot catch a glimpse of it so long as we are working through our mind and indriyas. However pure that mind may become. When it becomes perfectly pure, the meaning of pure is that it has gone beyond the limitations of a normal mind. It stands to reason then that there is only one way to attain to the freedom which is the goal of all the noblest aspirations of mankind. Now he is reminding us, our aspiration is to be free. Our aspiration may be for knowledge, our aspiration may be for joy, our aspiration may be for greatness, but all are possible only in the freedom. So that is called the noblest aspirations of mankind. And that is by giving up this little life, this little I, giving up this little universe, giving up this earth, giving up heaven, giving up the body, giving up the mind, giving up everything that is limited and conditioned. This is freedom. How we are going to achieve it? Through karma. If we give up our attachment to this little universe of the senses or of the mind, we shall be free immediately. Because the conditioning is in the mind. The only way to come out of bondage is to go beyond the limitations of law, to go beyond causation, to go beyond mind. But it is the most difficult thing to give up the clinging to this universe, asakti. Few ever attain to that. These are two ways to do that. I told three. Swamiji will show the three. First, dividing between the real knowledge and our world. There are two ways to do that, mentioned in our books. One is called the neti neti, not this, not this. That is going beyond the mind, that is called knowledge, jnana marga. The other is called the iti. The former is the negative and the latter is the positive way. The negative way is the most difficult. It is only possible to the men of very highest, exceptional minds and gigantic wills, who simply stand up and say, no, I will not have this, and the mind and body obey their will, and they come out successful. They are the real jnanis. But such people are very rare. The second way, iti iti. The vast majority of mankind choose the positive way, the way through the world, making use of all the bondages themselves to break those very bondages. Example was given that karma, pravritti and nivritti, Swamiji had explained that karma naturally is selfish. If the karma is unselfish, slowly we are coming out. Only when the infinite unselfishness has been achieved, that we have read in the previous chapter. Making use of all the bondages themselves to break those very bondages. This is also a kind of giving up, only it is done slowly and gradually. By knowing things, enjoying things, and thus obtaining experience, and knowing the nature of things, not only ordinary experience, knowing the nature of things. Until the mind lets them all go at last. So, if the mind can renounce everything, till then we work. At last, and becomes unattached. So, unattachment is the life's work in the second case. The former way of obtaining non-attachment is by reasoning. That is the Jnana Marga. And the latter way is through work and experience. The first is the path of Jnana Yoga and is characterized by the refusal to do any work. Path. The second is that of Karma Yoga, in which there is no cessation from work. For vast majority of mankind, everyone must work in this universe. In this universe again, Only those who are perfectly satisfied with the self, that shloka, yastu atmarati revasya, whose desires do not go beyond the self, whose mind never strays out of the self, to whom the self is all in all, only those do not work. The rest must work. Evidently. So long as this I and mine is there, we have to work. If we have this I and mine, and yet we say we do not work, that will be foolishness. A current rushing down of its own nature falls into a hollow and makes a whirlpool. This I is like this, and after running a little in that whirlpool, it emerges again in the form of the free current to go on unchecked. Each human life is like that current. It gets into the world, gets involved in this world of space, time and causation, which whirls around a little, crying out, my father, my brother, my name, my fame, and so on, and at last emerges out of it and regains its original freedom. How? Through wisdom. The whole universe is doing that. Whether we know it or not, whether we are conscious or unconscious of it, we are all working to get out of this dream of the world of work. World of work is dream, as much real as a dream is. Man's experience in this world is to enable him to get out of its whirlpool. What is Karma Yoga? So he defines here. The knowledge of the secret of work. So, I think this is enough for the day. Before I close, you see on the chat from this Wednesday, the university class which I am having will starting on Viveka Chudamani. I have sent that link to some, I will send to some more, and here it has been pasted today on the chat section. Om Paratatve Sada Lino Ramakrishna Samagya Yo Dharma Sthapana Rato Viresham Tam Namamyam. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Pranam Maharaj.
Yes.